You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another Top 10 video. I'm finally getting around to doing Top 10 underrated games. Now keep in mind for this list, the games don't actually have to be poorly received, just underrated. A lot of them are poorly received, but not all of them are. For some reason there was an audio glitch here. What I said was, a lot of these games have gotten better reception in recent years because they've built up more of a following, but there is still some initial poor reception that it had, plus there are some stubborn people who still have the opinion that these games are bad. With this list, I'm going in order from least to most underrated, so, the most underrated will be the top pick. That said, it's not necessarily a 100% perfect order, because obviously there is some nuance to it, and a lot of it is personal taste for me, and, in all honesty, a couple of these could be rearranged and it would still probably make sense to me. But that said, I put it in the most concise order I could think of, and I'm pretty comfortable with the way this list turned out. Alright, so here's an addendum. This game absolutely deserves to be on the list, and I'm actually recording this after the next one, because there's actually two addendums in this video. Because again, I didn't want to have to redo the video. So number 12, again, it would probably be much higher on the list had I thought of it before. Again, that's the problem with the way I do things sometimes, is I forget stuff while making the video. But this absolutely deserves to be on the list, and that is Bulletstorm. Bulletstorm was made by Epic Games back when they were known for doing Gears of War, long before they were known for the fucking abomination that is Fortnite. But Bulletstorm is a really fun, raunchy game. It's got really good over-the-top humor. The mechanics are really cool and interesting, and it has similarities to Gears of War in a couple of regards, but it's mostly its own thing. And overall, it's just a really fun game, very funny, and as an added bonus, you can play as Duke Nukem in the full clip edition. So, Bulletstorm, absolutely underrated, great game. Alright, so here's an addendum. I'm adding a number 11. This would actually be number 4, and everything else would shift down, but I don't want to have to redo the whole video, and I don't want to do that weird number scheme like I did with underrated movies. I can't believe I forgot something again, but here we go. So at number 11, which again would actually be more like number 4, we have Conker Live and Reloaded. It's a remake of Conker's Bad Fur Day on the original Xbox, and while there are those who like it, it is widely hated for kind of a dumb reason. A lot of people don't like it, simply due to the extra censorship when it comes to the language track. More things are bleeped out. Which, yeah, I don't like that either. That does drive me a little nuts. But there is uncensored language on the multiplayer if you've unlocked it as a feature. It doesn't unlock it on the story mode for whatever reason, but on the multiplayer you can unlock it. And it was supposed to be Conker Live and Uncut, so it is a little bit kind of lame that they did the exact opposite with the language. However, it does actually restore a deleted scene from Bad Fur Day in Saving Private Rodent when they're all on stakes, about to be shot to death. They added back in the original squirrel, because originally there were multiple squirrels there. So the fact that it restored that is pretty cool. I would say it's also probably slightly gorier. So although there is more censorship with the language, I would say visually it's less censored. Obviously, I do prefer Bad Fur Day being one of my all-time favorite games. But Live and Reloaded does a lot of things right, and it does a couple of things even better than Bad Fur Day. For instance, the third-person shooter sections of the game are actually better in Live and Reloaded. The spooky chapter, the war chapter, and the heist chapter, I think, all play better in Live and Reloaded. Not to mention the gameplay is different enough that it is worth playing on its own. Even though it is the same exact story, it is still a different game, and I still enjoy going back and playing it over and over again, just as much as I like playing Bad Fur Day, to be honest. So yeah, Conker Live and Reloaded, it's a good remake, not as good as the original, but still quite good. And it's definitely deserved to be on this list, so I was stupid to forget it originally. Now let's move on to number 10. So without further ado, let's jump into number 10. Number 10, we have YIIK, a postmodern RPG. Now, I would say out of the games on this list, this is the worst game, like talking about objective quality and things like that. And another reason it is number 10 is because, although I do think it is underrated to an extent, it also does have a pretty massive ironic following. Well, maybe massive isn't the right word, but passionate, I guess, would be. It's not like large in number, but it has its own cult following. Not to mention the creator himself is very passionate about it and is still releasing new updates to the game, and will be releasing one hopefully this year, I would imagine. I'm still waiting on that 1.5 update. Supposedly it's coming out this year. Now, this is a game that I was fascinated with ever since I first heard about it, because all I would see of it is negative video essays. And their assessments of the game are fairly correct. It is not a good game. It is, in a way, so bad it's a good game, but in other ways it's not. It's in a really weird position. I call it a guilty pleasure of mine. It's the only only game I can confidently use that term, because I don't really like the term guilty pleasure, because it almost implies that it's shameful to like it. Y2K, I wouldn't call it shameful, but it's something that's definitely bad, and it's not even so bad it's good, but it does have its moments where it is almost good. You can tell the guy making it genuinely cared about it and was trying to make something deep, even if it is ultimately fairly pretentious. However, that pretentiousness does give it its own sort of charm. The main character is a total asshole, and he's my favorite character in the game. You're not supposed to like him, but he's the only one I like. The game itself took inspiration from several old RPGs, most noticeably Earthbound, and visually the game looks great. It's also got an amazing soundtrack. Overall, I love the game. It's a weird love-hate I have for it because it can be frustrating and repetitive. Like, the combat gameplay is fine, it's nothing to write home about, but it's interesting enough. And the problem is it's repetitive as all hell, and once you've done it once, you kind of know what you're doing, and it's just the same thing over and over and over again. I think this could be said about a lot of turn-based RPGs, but the little mini-games and aspects of it make it kind of a drag sometimes. So obviously I'm not saying that this game is a masterpiece or anything, but I think it's underrated in the fact that there is a certain charm to it. It has this certain X factor that makes it just fascinating to play. Something has always drawn me to it when I was watching those video essays on it, ultimately culminating in my playthrough and my own review of it, which I've done on the channel. The gameplay itself is decent, the story's kind of stupid and convoluted, but has its good moments. But like I said, there's a reason it's number 10, but I still think it was worth mentioning because I do actually quite enjoy this game for whatever reason. Alright, number 9 we have Fallout 4. Now Fallout 4 does have its own following, and a lot of newer Fallout fans actually don't have a problem with it. But a lot of the core demographic of Fallout don't like Fallout 4. There are a weird subgroup of Fallout fans that like 4 more than 3, and those people are fucking crazy to me, because 3 is obviously my favorite game. Fallout 4 does do a lot of things wrong that drive me nuts. I am going to be doing a full review of Fallout 4 once I finish the DLC, because I did play through the main game, but I do like to play through the DLC of each of these to be fair with Fallout 3 and New Vegas, because I did the DLC on those when I reviewed them. That said, Fallout 4 definitely has a lot of changes I don't like. I don't like the new level up system. I don't like the visuals a lot. I think it's too colorful. I think the Radiant quests were a neat idea, but I honestly think they're fucking dull, and I think they should be labeled as such, because I redid Cleansing the Commonwealth multiple times without realizing it was a quest that just repeats over and over and over. I thought I had to do it to progress in the Brotherhood of Steel, but you don't. Most of the factions in the game I'm not the biggest fan of. The Railroad is fucking dumb. I don't like the Railroad. They're lame. The Minutemen are a really cool concept, but are not utilized properly, and a lot of them revolves around crafting, which is another major problem in the game, is the crafting system. It's fucking awful. And there's a huge focus on it, but also, the Minutemen, cool concept, boring quests. For a while, I found the game relatively boring. The intro to the game is actually really good. It's honestly my favorite opening to any Fallout game, with the nuke falling and everything. I think that's really cool. Maybe not the most realistic, that they get in just in the nick of time as the nuclear, wind is coming towards them, but nevertheless, it's still cinematically really cool. But the reason that this game is on this list is because I overall think Fallout 4 is actually still a pretty fun game. The role-playing was severely toned down, and like I said, most of the factions suck, but one thing absolutely carries the game, and that is the Brotherhood of Steel. The Fallout 4 Brotherhood of Steel is my favorite faction in the entire Fallout series, hands down. And it's such an interesting story mode. I really like it, because they have a very distinct ideology where they want to wipe out all of the mutants and synths, which would put some people off, but I find that fascinating and I love it. It absolutely carried the game, and it's the kid from Fallout 3, Maxim. He's now the leader of the Brotherhood of Steel, and he united the outcasts to reform and make the Brotherhood back to its former glory. So yeah, that said, Fallout 4, it's definitely my least favorite of the Bethesda Fallout games that I've played. I have not played 76. I have also not played Fallout Shelter. It is considerably better than Fallout Brotherhood of Steel on the original Xbox, although I don't necessarily hate that game either, although that game is bad. Fallout 4 I wouldn't say is completely bad. I would say it's decent. There are problems with it, but if you're looking at it just on its own, it's a good game. It's just poorly executes a lot of the things in Fallout and removes a lot of key features. Fallout 4 is still a really good Fallout game, and it does have its fans, so ultimately, since it still does have a fairly decent following, I only put it at number 9. Alright, number 8. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is one of my top 10 favorite games and one of my top 10 favorite RPGs. Knights of the Old Republic 2, however, is not quite as good. There are a lot of issues I have with it, namely that the game was unfinished. There isn't really an ending. It's super anticlimactic. Much like with Fallout 4, it does have its following, and I think that that following has grown in years, because I think that it was a little bit lesser back when it came out. I think most people complained about the fact that it was unfinished. However, I have heard one YouTuber say that he heard that most people say 2 is better. He was the first person and only person so far that I've ever heard say that, but the fact that he seems so confident in his assertion tells me that there must be at least some degree of a fan base. Which is good, because KOTOR 2 is great. It is flawed, yes. It crashes a lot. Like, even more than the first game. The first game mainly only crashes when you plant mines in battle. The second game, when you're on Korriban and you go in Shyrak Cave, you're guaranteed to crash at least once. But, despite its faults, the game does introduce a lot of interesting new mechanics. There are a lot more feats you can add to your character, for instance. You can turn any skill into a class skill as a feat, first off, so you can have less point cost when you level up. You can use a feat called Finesse that allows you to use your dexterity for both your ranged weapons and your melee weapons. It just goes on whatever stat is higher. The influence system was also really interestingly introduced, and it made it much more dynamic with the different party members being influenced by you, and your choices will affect their choices. That said, one thing that's frustrating about this new system is you can't advance every character fully in a single playthrough. It's very difficult to do. Not to mention, it feels a lot shorter. I don't know if it actually is a lot shorter, but it just feels to me like it goes by much, much quicker. And that could just be sort of the unfinished feel to it. Maybe it actually in reality is longer, it just feels shorter because it feels incomplete. But either way, it does somehow feel shorter. That said, it's really cool. It's got returning party members, 3 returning party members to be specific. I won't spoil which ones. And it does have a few callbacks to the first game, and I do think that that is really cool as well. The planets in the game themselves are actually pretty good. I really like Onderon, and I really like Nar Shaddaa. Duxon is also really good. That's the moon leading into Onderon. I think that the final boss was a really cool take and a nice twist, and I like how cynical the game is about both the Jedi and the Sith and the Force in general. It's not quite up to snuff with KOTOR 1 because KOTOR 1 is just such a masterpiece, but KOTOR 2 is still worth playing, and if you like KOTOR 1, I still would highly recommend it because it's more KOTOR. And again, gameplay-wise, there are some improvements, even if story-wise it's not quite as good. Alright, number 7, Takeshi's Challenge. Now, Takeshi's Challenge is one of the quintessential worst games of all time that people will put on those lists. Most people will tell you that the game is not fun, and that it is frustrating and needlessly cryptic. And this is by design, and that's why I fucking love it. Takeshi's Challenge was made by Beat Takeshi, or Takeshi Kitano, who, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know is my favorite director of all time. Takeshi himself does not like video games, so when approached to make a video game, he decided to go out of his way to make a big middle finger to gamers. Takeshi's Challenge is an anti-game. It is meant to piss you off. It is meant to be bad. In order to play the game, you have to do a series of very specific tasks in a very specific order, and the slightest fuck-up, you fail the entire game. Couple this with the fact that the hang gliding section is one of the worst and most frustrating sections in a video game I've ever played, and the fact that there's fake passwords that will give you the bad ending, or will give you the wrong items on the final stage so it is impossible to complete, and you get the biggest fuck you to video games ever made, and I love it. The game itself is still pretty fun, too, and it's really innovative for the NES, because it's fairly open world, you can kill anyone in it, and you can free roam it. It can be open-ended. You can fuck around and have some fun. Like, you won't win doing that. In fact, you can't do that if you want to win, really. But you can, and you can explore. And there's even an iOS and Android port in Japan only that adds an extra stage, being the America stage, and there's no way to get that here. I would love to do that. I really wish there was a way to get it here. It's one of my favorite NES games. I mean, it's technically a Famicom game because it was never released outside of Japan. I do have the English fan translation on a ROM hack cartridge. I also have the original Japanese cartridge. I love Takeshi's Challenge. I've talked about it before on the channel multiple times. I have a lot of fun playing it. I like the memorization of tedious tasks. I think that that makes it fun. And in all honesty, most of the game is fairly easy to pull off. The only part that's truly really difficult is the hang gliding section. I think that its reputation as one of the worst games just shows that it succeeded in what it was trying to accomplish. I honestly think it's really, really fun, and the humor and tongue-in-cheek nature of it make me love it. Hence why it's both on this list and it was on my top 10 NES games list. Now moving on to number 6, we have The Simpsons Road Rage. Now, The Simpsons Road Rage, at its core, is just a Crazy Taxi clone, but with Simpsons characters. There's no arguing about that, that's true, that's all it is. It's so similar, in fact, they got sued. Mainly because of the little arrow pointing at the top of the screen being patented by Sega for Crazy Taxi. But nevertheless, it is a fun game. It massively gets overlooked because Simpsons Hit and Run is such a better game. The Simpsons Hit and Run is amazing, and basically everybody agrees on that. But Hit and Run itself is sort of the sequel to Road Rage. It was originally intended to be a sequel to Road Rage as well, so that's why I just consider it to be a sequel, even if it isn't directly the same. Road Rage itself is fun, albeit repetitive. Admittedly, it does get a little repetitive. Once you find a map and character you're good with, you'll probably just do that over and over again until you have enough money to win. That said, the mission mode does mix things up a little bit, but again, most of the missions are pretty similar. It's just take this person to this location or destroy this number of items. But it does have a lot of playable Simpsons characters, and it's unique in that aspect. Most Simpsons video games don't have anywhere near as many playable characters from the show. In Road Rage, you can play as lots of different characters. The main Simpsons family, you can play as Reverend Lovejoy, Ned Flanders, Moe, Snake, Chief Wiggum, and the list goes on. It's a lot of characters. Not to mention there's holiday characters for when your console is set to a specific date. So there's the Christmas Apu when you have your console set to Christmas. There's Halloween Bart when you have it set to Halloween. There's New Year's Krusty when you have it set to New Year's. I believe that's all of them. But there's also cheat code characters like playing as Smithers, or playing as Homer in a Lego car, or playing as the nuclear buses, which are one of the antagonists of the game that Mr. Burns sets up. It's also fully voiced by the cast of the show, so most of the characters have something to say. Smithers doesn't have any lines in the game for whatever reason. But a lot of the characters are fully voiced with their own little quips, and there are interactions between the characters. Overall, if you like Crazy Taxi, I'd say give it a try, especially if you like The Simpsons. And if you like Hit and Run, give it a try as well. It's not as good as Hit and Run, but it's still a really good game. Alright, number 5. We have Fallout 3. Now, obviously, if we were going by the games themselves, this would be number 1, because Fallout 3 is currently my favorite game of all time. And Fallout 3 does have its defenders, like myself. It has quite a few people in its fan base. It is pretty divisive between 3 and New Vegas. But that's just it. The reason it's on here is because of New Vegas fans. New Vegas fans really like to shit on Fallout 3, even though it's a great RPG, with a great atmosphere, a great story, and tons of great side quests. Fallout New Vegas has a ton more side quests, but most of them are forgettable. Fallout 3, every single side quest is memorable. Every single major town is memorable. Fallout New Vegas, maybe like 30% of it is memorable for me, if I'm being perfectly honest. And that's not to shit on it, because I love New Vegas. New Vegas is my second favorite Fallout game. I love New Vegas. But comparing Fallout 3 to Fallout New Vegas is like comparing KOTOR 1 to KOTOR 2. Which is also ironic, because Obsidian made both KOTOR 2 and Fallout New Vegas. If you like Fallout and haven't played Fallout 3, I'd say you're missing out. It's got a lot of interesting little locations, fun characters. It's got a few decent companions. Again, the companions, I think, in New Vegas are a little bit better, as are the factions, because New Vegas has a lot more of a focus on factions. But Fallout 3's two main factions are still interesting, the Enclave or the Brotherhood of Steel. Not to mention, you know, there's Raiders, and there's the Slavers in Paradise Falls, and things like that. I also really like the way the karma system works in Fallout 3. Obviously, I've talked about Fallout 3 in depth multiple times, because Fallout 3 is my favorite game, and I've done a shitload of videos on it. I've done multiple playthroughs on the channel, and I intend to do multiple more playthroughs. What else can I say? I fucking love Fallout 3, and New Vegas fans earn it a spot on this list because they make it underrated because they shit on it by proxy. Because not only are they not content with saying New Vegas is good, they have to go out of their way to say Fallout 3 is bad in addition to that, which I think is unfair because I think both games are great. And again, I like Fallout 3 more. Alright, number 4, we have The Walking Dead Season 2 from Telltale. The Walking Dead Season 2 is often considered by a lot of fans to be the worst. Now, granted, Season 3 is also typically considered the worst, but there is also a large number of fans that consider Season 2 to be worse. That said, I just disagree. Season 2 is great. Season 2 does have its flaws, I'm not going to pretend it doesn't. For instance, most of the characters in your group are kinda just there. Their personalities are very surface level. I'm not going to pretend that's not the case. But Kenny absolutely carries The Walking Dead Season 2. Being my favorite character in the Telltale series overall, and Walking Dead Season 2 being, I think, his best character arc. I've done videos on this before. I did a whole video talking about why Kenny is the greatest character. But Walking Dead Season 2, a common criticism people try to have for it is to say your choices don't matter. And while this isn't untrue, I think they kind of missed the point because I think that's thematically part of it. I'm sure that budget and time crunch was a factor in developing it that way, but I always thought that the theme of Season 2 was that you're hopeless because you're a child, and your choices don't matter as much because you're a child, so that feeling of hopelessness, no matter what you choose, you ultimately fail in most scenarios. I think that that was sort of the theme of Season 2, and I actually think it's brilliantly written. Some people might not like that your choices have less effect than they did in Season 1, but I ultimately thought that it was a good change-up in dynamic, and it makes more sense given the context of the fact that you're literally playing as a little girl. Yes, Season 2 has its cheap deaths. Yes, Season 2 has a lot of forgettable characters. But the characters that are memorable are really memorable. Being, you know, Kenny, again, returning character, but Carver. There are lots of things that make Season 2 great, and it's my second favorite season overall. I've so far only played Season 1, 2, 3, and then the first episode of 4. Or maybe it's the first 2 episodes of 4. I think I played the first 2 episodes of 4. But I really like Season 1 and 2, and I've always viewed Season 2 as the end to Clementine's story, even though it's not. I personally don't like the half-assed explaining away your Season 2 ending at the beginning of Season 3. I thought that was kind of lame. But that said, Walking Dead Season 2 is great, and if you haven't played it and you have played Season 1, I'd recommend it. The Telltale games are great, and like I said, I like Season 3 a hell of a lot more than I thought I would, and I've been enjoying Season 4 so far as well. But Season 1 and 2 are my 2 favorites, and for me, those are like the true game, and then everything else after that is supplemental. But again, that's just me. Alright, moving into the top 3, we got number 3, Halo 3 ODST. Now, this is a case where the game itself has received a better reception as years have gone on. People have come to accept and realize that it was a good game more and more often. But the sheer amount of hatred this game got for years after its release absolutely earns it the number 3 spot on this list. And there are still adamant fans who hate Halo ODST for some god knows reason. Halo 3 ODST is one of the best Halo games, in my opinion. It has the best soundtrack, it has a really cool, isolated atmosphere. It's a unique game because you're playing as a weaker character. You're playing as a soldier rather than a fucking Spartan. I think that the visors were implemented really well, where you got the night vision that highlights everything, and it's got the map and the audio logs. I really love the theme of tracking down your crew and finding them, which is something a lot of people overlook. There was a Game Informer article that said that the rookie was like one of the biggest wimps, because they said he never did anything himself and only like sat around thinking about, oh, I wish other people were here, and reliving other people's lives. But it's like, they missed the point with that. The rookie's entire thing is he's an expert tracker. He looks at a helmet that hit a fucking glass thing and he's like, I see this, they must have gone this way based on the trajectory. He's amazing at tracking them based on such small amount of clues. Not to mention, I just like all of the characters in Alpha 9. They're all really good characters. My favorite being the rookie, and then my second favorite probably being Romeo. I really like Romeo. Romeo is such a good character. He's a smartass, he talks back, but he genuinely still cares about his crew. I also really like Buck. Buck is hot-headed, Buck can be stern, and Buck can be a little bit of a simp, but ultimately he also cares for his crew, and he cares about his fellow soldiers and will defy orders to protect them. This isn't so much seen in the game as it is in the novels, with him defying orders. He does go back to rescue Dare, which I think is technically against orders, but it ultimately doesn't end up being a problem. But there is actually a time in Halo New Blood where he disobeys direct orders, saving the lives of multiple Spartans. Obviously that's supplemental and not actually in the game, so technically shouldn't go into this in this analysis, but I thought it was worth mentioning anyway. ODST, I think, did the open world thing in Halo best. Halo Infinite, in all honesty, has bored me to tears the couple of times I've played it. Like, granted, I haven't beat Halo Infinite, so, you know, fair enough, but I think that the hub world and exploring it and finding more and more of the city, solving the mystery of what happened to your crew is so much more interesting. Halo ODST is easily one of the best Halo games, and I'm glad that people are starting to appreciate it. But like I said, for many, many years after its release, everyone told me I was crazy for liking it. Reviewers shit all over it. I remember there was a Guru Larry video where he was talking about Master Chief Collection when it came out, and he said that the Master Chief Collection only had the Master Chief games, and he said, so thankfully no ODST, but sadly no Reach. Which, ODST I think is so much better than Halo Reach. Don't get me wrong, I love Halo Reach. All of the Bungie Halo games are good, but Reach is my least favorite of the Bungie Halo games. My favorite being 3, I think followed by 1, then 2, then ODST, then Reach, I think. I can't remember if that's shifted around, sometimes my arrangement changes there, but Reach is usually the last, just because Master Chief is iconic, his trilogy is great, and ODST is a great supplement to that. Reach is a great prequel, don't get me wrong. It just doesn't hit the same as the first 3 in ODST for me personally. Not to mention, ODST clearly had the best firefight. This is a case where less is more, because the firefight was so much more customizable in Halo Reach, it didn't give you the same feeling of satisfaction when you completed it. Now, admittedly, it is much more customizable in the Master Chief Collection version of ODST Firefight, and I don't have a problem with that. I actually think they implemented it really well. And I don't necessarily think that, you know, having the choices was the problem with Reach. I just didn't get the same feeling. ODST Firefight has a very unique feeling to it in comparison to Reach Firefight. Not to mention, ODST introduced a couple of weapons that are only in ODST, although they are also in Master Chief Collection Halo 3 now, in multiplayer. That being the Silenced SMG, which technically was introduced in Halo 2 PC, but it's a little bit different than that. And then the Auto Mag, which is my favorite of the Halo pistols, personally, because it's a silenced magnum that shoots much quicker. It does slightly less damage than other Halo pistols, but I think that it does really well because it's rapid fire. And when you use it in Halo 3 multiplayer, it's a 4-shot headshot, whereas the Halo 3 pistol is a 5-shot headshot, so it's better in that regard. Obviously, nothing compares to the Halo 1 pistol, but the Halo ODST pistol is still really good, plus that rapid rate of fire just makes it so satisfying to use. Alright, number 2, Doom 3. Now, Doom 3 was my introduction to the Doom series, and it, again, also has its fans, but I do think that Doom 3 is hated more than it's liked by the Doom fanbase. That might be changing up too, I honestly don't know. It's not like I stick around in, like, forums or anything like that. I don't really do anything like that. So this is going purely on my own assumptions, bias, and experience with people. So keep that in mind when I say that I don't think it has that big of a following. Regardless, it does get overlooked, and a lot of people view it as the black sheep of the Doom games, because it is very different than the other Doom games. But in my opinion, that's actually for the better. It's not my favorite Doom game. Doom Eternal is still my favorite, but Doom 3 is easily in my top 3. I think the 2 Bethesda Doom games might be better than it, but I honestly think Doom 3 is very close behind them. The reason Doom 3 is so divisive is because you don't feel as much like a badass. You're a lot weaker because you're just a Marine rather than fucking Doom guy. Demons are much stronger, the space station is all dark. But the reason for these changes is part of why I like it so much, because Doom 3 is fundamentally a horror game, whereas the rest of the Doom series is predominantly an action game. There's always been horror elements to it, and it's not like there aren't action elements in Doom 3, but Doom 3 is the most consciously horror-driven Doom game. And I think that's why I like it so much, because it's so drastically different. I love being in the spaceship, or space station rather, or just on Mars in general, being all dark, surrounded by powerful demons with just a tiny flashlight. I think that's great. Now, in the original version of Doom 3, you couldn't have your flashlight and your weapon out at the same time. They changed this in the BFG edition by making the flashlight shoulder-mounted. I think having it shoulder-mounted makes much more sense, and I ultimately think that it is probably for the better. However, it does take away part of the atmosphere because the tension is partially from the fact that you can't have both out. Nevertheless, I do think the BFG edition is probably overall the superior edition, partially because of that reason, also partially because it includes DLC. Not to mention it also includes Doom 1 and 2 on the disc, so, you know, the BFG edition is the way to get your best bang for your buck when you're playing Doom 3. Although at one point, they did censor the Wolfenstein levels on Doom 2. I think they fixed that now, so that's no longer the case. But yeah, Doom 3 is great. I love the horror in it. It scared the hell out of me as a kid. I'd put it in my top 10 horror games as well, probably. I really love the atmosphere of Doom 3. It's genuinely really creepy, and you feel powerless a lot of the game. I also really like the design of Pinky in Doom 3. I think the Pinkies are a lot cooler. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the classic design, but the cyborg dog weird look they got for him in 3 I really like. Plus, I like how it encourages exploration to an extent, because you got the little PDA that you can get optional stuff to open armor lockers and things that give you loot. And there's also some secret areas, and you can find Super Turbo Turkey Puncher 3. But yeah, overall, Doom 3 is great. Alright, now on to some honorable mentions before we get to number 1. First honorable mention we have is Brink. Part of the reason it's only an honorable mention is I don't like it anywhere near as much as I used to. Brink itself also isn't a great game. It's decent and pretty interesting in concept. It did a lot of things that people credit Titanfall for doing, like the parkour stuff you can do, like running on walls and stuff like that. Those were all done in Brink long before they were done in Titanfall, and I'm sure there's other games that have done it too. Brink was very ambitious with your character creation, although all the characters always end up looking like shit. To be honest, they all kind of look the same anyway, even though it's supposed to be like no 2 characters will ever be alike because of the sheer endless possibilities. But then all of them have like the same butt-ugly face. It's also got a really good soundtrack, but overall the game has grown off me, I think, in recent years. I still like it, but it definitely is underrated, so it's an honorable mention. Another honorable mention, I would say, is Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks. The only reason it's only an honorable mention, though, is because I think it's popular enough not to be a top 10 underrated. I think it's definitely recognized by enough of the fan base, but it definitely, I do still think, should get more recognition than it does. And I have done a playthrough of it on the channel as well. Another honorable mention I'll throw out there is Pepsi Man. I think a lot of people like Pepsi Man, but a lot of people also call it bad. I think it's not hated enough to be on this list proper, but it is underrated in its own right. I do think it has its definite fan base, especially due to people playing it online and AVGN doing an episode on it, things like that. It's definitely not completely hated, but it is still worth mentioning, I think. But I think that's all the honorable mentions I can think of right now, so we'll just go with that and move swiftly on to number 1. Alright, now this should be no surprise to you at all if you've been watching my channel for an extended period of time. Duke Nukem Forever is easily the most underrated game of all time. It gets so much fucking hate, and I think a large part of that is just due to how long it took to make. Like, I think people overhype just how bad it supposedly is. Like, people will talk about it being sexist or dated with the humor, but, like, obviously that's not a problem for me, and I honestly think it's not even completely true. Like, yes, the women are all sexist caricatures, but so are the fucking men. Like, all the men in the game are needlessly horny and constantly talking about dicks and stuff, especially Duke's best friend. Like, yes, the game is linear, which a lot of people don't like because Duke Nukem 3D is not linear, and Duke Nukem 3D is the one that it is a follow-up to, even though there were a lot of other Duke Nukem games in between. And women are literally trophies you unlock in multiplayer, but honestly, I just think that adds to the charm because it's fucking Duke Nukem. If you didn't want a sexist game, why are you playing Duke Nukem at all? Duke Nukem has always been a sexist series, and to pretend it isn't is just to be willfully ignorant. Duke Nukem himself is the ultimate Chad, and bitches are his reward. Like, that's always been the case. But Duke Nukem Forever does a lot of interesting things, and I know that there is a restoration going on the 2001 edition of it, and I played a little bit of it. Hot take. But I honestly think that the final product is better than the 2001 build. I know a lot of people aren't going to like to hear me say that, but I have so much more fun playing the 2011 build, you know, the final version of the game. I have so much more fun playing that than I do playing the unfinished, 2001 build. Now, granted, I've only played a little bit of it, and the version that has been restored is only the first chapter, and I haven't even completed that, but I played it for a couple of hours, and I had fun. I still enjoyed it quite a bit, but Duke Nukem Forever is still fun as it is. Not to mention, a lot of things people overlook is Duke Nukem Forever actually has a really cool DLC, where Dr. Proton, the villain from the original Duke Nukem game, comes back as the villain. Although most people who have played the DLC agree it is better than the base game, so it does at least get some recognition for the DLC. But I know there's a lot of people who don't even know it exists. Like, obviously, the load screens are a big thing with Duke Nukem Forever. I think that's the biggest problem I have with it, is the long load screens. The linear aspect of it, I never found to be a problem. It's a modern shooter, and it plays like a modern shooter. It does it well, but the biggest difference is, first off, it's super based because it's Duke Nukem. But second off, the humor is on point. It is in character, it is consistently funny, and it's constantly taking jabs at other games, which some people don't like because of how bad they perceive the game to be. And like I said, it's not perfect. The graphics aren't anything to write home about. In fact, the graphics are actually kind of bad. But you gotta remember, this game was in development hell for like 15 fucking years. Like, Duke says 12 years at the beginning of the game, but it's 15 years it was actually in development, so he's underselling it. I also think Duke Nukem Forever has a really cool version of the Duke Nukem theme. It's also got a really cool remix of the Duke Burger theme from Duke Nukem 3D. And overall, like I said, the linear aspect of it really didn't bother me. Like, it bothered a lot of people, but it's like, it's not Duke Nukem 3D. If you want to play Duke Nukem 3D, go back and play it. I mean, there's the World Tour Edition that adds more levels, so do that. But Duke's raunchy humor, the sheer testosterone exuded from the character, and the fact that it's the kind of game you would not get made today because everyone's a fucking woke pussy now, just makes it so much more endearing to go back and play for me. Like, I love Duke Nukem Forever. I fucking love it. It is such a good game. And I have played it on stream multiplayer multiple times, and I've done a couple of videos actually playing the game because I had to censor some stuff. There's quite a bit of nudity in the game. I don't know if you know this, but Duke Nukem Forever has quite a bit of nudity. They also have Capture the Babe instead of Capture the Flag in multiplayer, so that's kind of funny. But yeah, I feel like a lot of people who criticize it for being sexist are just pussies, and a lot of people who criticize it for being dated don't appreciate the throwbacks. Like, yeah. Like, the jokes have callbacks to older stuff, but I don't think that inherently makes the jokes themselves dated. Like, it's definitely a time capsule in just how the raunchy humor works, but that's the era I love. I fucking hate how everyone's a pussy now to tell jokes. Duke Nukem Forever is not afraid to do that, and for that, it is absolutely the most underrated game ever of all time. This has been Fugitive Red Eye, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Have a good one. Toodles!